This is one thing, what we think about ourselves, but the other thing is what the public think about us. So we think that the Climate Policy Institute is a think tank, and which carries out education for primary school students, for secondary school students and university students in an interdisciplinary manner. And we organize them study tours, we introduce them many important infrastructure and many interesting things which are important in the green transition of this country. We perform study tours for them. We are disseminating knowledge. We are building community among conservative and liberal, let's say, green civic organizations. And so this is what we do, and through these activities we are representing the green conservatism, which is basically in a way of avoiding radical extremes, like we believe that the focus in the people, the focus in the action, not in the climate catastrophe demonstrations and this kind of way. So we are a little bit more moderate, and we would like to train our students to act, not to demonstrate. Not the first thing should be the demonstrations. So this is what we are, and we are just half of the organizing, inviting party. In the first place, you would look at what the German-Hungarian Institute did, and so I also would like to welcome you in this event, and I will continue as a moderator now. So, ladies and gentlemen, we really did a miracle by organizing this event, because you all know that Hungary is a pro-nuclear country. Not only the government, but the public has a positive attitude towards the nuclear energy. 68% of the Hungarian people think that the nuclear energy is something positive, knowing that we don't have too much other choice to be energy independent or to be sovereign in our energy supply. So we did a miracle in a way that we could invite two highly respected scientists from two anti-nuclear countries as a pro-nuclear inviting party, and we are very interested in to know their opinion, inside opinion about the nuclear energy, the future of nuclear energy, how they can see it from their point of view, from an Austrian point of view and from a German point of view. Of course, it is very hard to generalize in such big countries and important countries the public opinion. It will be their personal opinion basically, but I hope that they can mirror the situation, what is happening in this field in Germany and in Austria. So I wanted to introduce them, but my colleague did, no problem. But we are very that they are here. We would like to thank them to come and to this very, very serious discussion about that. And first of all, I would like to give them a chance for a short self-introduction, doing it by their own words, and to introduce their institution and their activity and what is a mainstream thinking about nuclear energy in their country. Is there a hope that it will be changed? So just for starting this, several simple questions. So.
Yeah, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank you for this invitation. So it's a great pleasure for me to be here in Budapest, and personally I feel a deep debt to all Hungarian people, because 34 years ago. It's a long time. You are very young people here. But you make the German reunification possible, and you opened a little bit the wall, and this is for me a very emotional act to be here. So, but now to your question, I'm coming from the TU Dresden. TU Dresden is one of the biggest universities in Germany. We are a full university among the so-called TU9. These are the 9 biggest universities in Germany. And of course, as expected and naturally in a university, we have different opinions about everything, I think, and so also about the nuclear energy. But personally, I think that the energy is the blood of our society. So it is necessary to have a secure, safe, and also in an economic viable way energy available. And if we look to the obligation and to our commitment to CO2 reduction, then we have not so much options. Yeah? There is wind and solar energy on the one hand side, but this is maybe we will be later to this. This is fluctuational energy, and on the other side we have the nuclear energy as a baseload energy. And so I think, we need in an energy mix for the future. We need nuclear energy for a certain amount, but we will see how we can handle it in a European scale. So my professionality is I'm coming from the process engineering side. I'm dealing with problems of combustion, of heat transfer, fundamental research in the field of heat transfer, but also concerning hydrogen generation and the integration of so-called renewable energy to the grid. This is my background.
Thank you, Ralph.
Yes. Well, thank you for the very kind introduction. The last time I was called a miracle was by my mother, so this is was a very nice way to start. Similar to Michael, I also work at a small university. I work at a small university in Vienna. I also do quite a bit of journalistic work. I write for a couple of Austrian newspapers, a couple of British and English publications. I have been working with the MCC both in Budapest and in Brussels, also with the German Institute on a couple of occasions. So I kind of try to have my fingers in many pots, I guess, or as my father uses to say, you have an opinion on everything, but not a clue of anything. I hope that I can show today that this is not entirely true. And I kind of want to echo a little bit what Michael has said, and I think he said it in a very, very humble way. I would actually go a step further and say, in its most basic sense, energy is life. There is one thing I always like to start these lectures with to kind of spice things up a little bit, which is without energy we would all be dead. And the reason for this is because nature wants to kill us. And the only reason why nature can't do it, or at least not as successful as it did in the past, is because we have access to energy. There are not many right angles in nature. The only reason why we fight right angles is because we create them. And for us to be able to create them, we need energy to waste. Mostly heat, but other forms as well. So I think this is really why this debate about nuclear energy is an important one, and it might sound at the beginning a little bit technical, right? I think this is why the energy topic, at least until 2 years ago, has kind of deterred people a little bit because it has which is true, right? It has a very technical element to it, but I can assure fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not an engineer. I'm an economist and a political scientist, or I'm what Dr. Pepper is to real doctors. So I kind of have, take a little bit of a cultural, political approach to it, because what I also believe is that one of the reasons why we no longer talk about these things that much is because we got so used to it. right? We simply assume you go into a room, you flick a switch, the light goes on, right? That water is there. So we, in many ways, we just say electricity comes out of a socket in the wall, the light goes on when we flick the switch, money comes out of the ATM, food is in the supermarket. We just take all these things for granted. And I think because we take them for granted to such a high extent, we forget that they are not. And I'll kind of go into this then when we discuss this in greater detail. But you will see that many of the worst kinds of human suffering correlate very, very highly with a lack of access to energy. I mean, I'll give you one quick example. The highest rate of child marriage all take place in areas, in countries that barely have any access to electricity. Now you might say, well, why is that connected? Well, for a very simple reason. If you don't have machines that do work for you, you need other humans that do work for you. I mean, we had a term for this, by the way, in the past, right? We don't use it that often anymore, but it still exists, and that is slavery. I think this is another thing we will have to discuss in greater detail. One of the reasons, apart from, let's say, the moral and maybe philosophical evolution of humanity, but one of the reasons why we don't have slavery that much anymore is because we have energy. Now, you might say, well, that strikes me as an exaggeration. Let me just give you two numbers before I hand it back over. The entire world, approximately, uses 100 billion barrels of oil as an energy equivalent. This is the amount of energy we use every year. If you would take that energy and say, okay, how much people would I need to do that work manually, right, without access to machines that run on fossil fuels, on nuclear and other sources of energy, you would need 500 billion people. So this is what the energy does for us. Right, just to be very clear about this. So if that energy wouldn't exist, if the power plants, whether they run with hydro, with nuclear, with coal, you name it, if they would not exist, we would lack the force, the power of 500 billion people. Every one of us in this room, and this is only true for the developed economies, if we take into account all the machines, everything we use, would be the equivalent of having 200 servants working for you 24/7, 365. Right, just to understand what the modern energy economy does for us. So why this topic I think is so interesting, because there is a streak in the modern green movement that tells us that we can reduce the amount of available energy but still maintain these living standards. And I think as we will find out and discuss in greater detail, those two things are not working, right? It's either one or the other, and the question is which one of those we want to have, or, and this I think where we come down on the side of nuclear, could you have both, right? Could you have a sustainable approach to energy but still maintain these high standards of living? And the argument that we, I think, are going to make is, yes, nuclear could be a potential path to this utopian world.
Okay, I could not imagine that we will go back to the Homo neanderthalensis when we are going to discuss about the nuclear energy, but it is interesting start. So it is often mentioned that the evolution of the human civilization is somehow interlinked with the evolution of the energy sources what we use. Somehow there is a direct correlation between the energy density of the energy carrier what we use and the developmental level of the civilization, articulation of the labor, and the wealth of the people, the standard of living of the people. But okay, it has a very linear evolution from the firewood to coal, nuclear energy, and now we are turning out towards the weather-dependent renewables. It seems a little bit controversial for me that because this is not the, how can I say, this evolution what we used to see in the technical development. So what do you think about this? Because the linear, the subsequent step should be the fusion energy, because it is even producing higher energy from the input. So what do you think that what will be the future, or how we can imagine the weather-dependent renewables or fusion energy, or together, how we can imagine it in the future?
Yeah, I think it was already mentioned by Wolf, the order of magnitude of energy. This is what we often have not in mind. So the amount of energy we need, and this was a very good example, I think. So I can expresses in gigawatt and terawatt hours, but this is more impressive to say 200 people you need. This is what we often forget. So we think that we need some windmills and we need some PV cells, and with that we can produce environmental friendly energy. But if we consider the huge amount of material which is needed, the huge amount of area for windmills which is needed, this is the one side of the coin. The other side is these are, I already mentioned it, these are fluctuational energies. So sometimes we have some solar energy, sometimes we have some wind energy, sometimes both, and a couple of days and sometimes also for over 1 week we have weather, wind and sun. So this is the so-called death calm, and if it is in winter time, then we can say it's a cold and dark death calm. So, and for that reason, we need, of course, also energy. But from where we can get the energy? If there is no wind, if there is no sun, okay, there is a very nice idea. We have an excess of production, and we can store it in hydrogen or in batteries for some days. But it means two things. One thing is that we have to increase the production capacity of wind and solars, windmills and solar fields again, to use this excess of energy for storage. And the next point is we need storage capacities and storage systems. And here, at the moment, we are far away from a technical, reliable level. So we call it in our language, we call it technology readiness level. That means it comes from the NASA. It means the level of 1 is the idea of a plane, for instance, and the level of 9, this is the high-end level. The plane can fly, it can take with passengers, and it's safe. So at the moment, we have no example of such a storage system where we can produce hydrogen in a large scale. I don't speak about laboratory electrolyzers. This is well known and no problem, but I speak from a large scale in megawatt, but also in gigawatt from the power. So we have not such an example yet. We are in a pilot scale, we can say. That means we are on the TRL, technology readiness level of 4. So, and this is what you mentioned. The first point, the energy density. If we look to wind energy, for instance, the energy density is in a order of magnitude of 5 watt per square meters. If we look to solar power, this is around about 20 watt per square meters. If we look to biomass, it's in the range of 1 watt per square meter. So this is a very low number all, but don't forget that this is not every time available. This is an average, and the storage system, storage capacity is still under development. So I think, again, we must be careful to discuss our ideas and to do in this way that we can change the system very quickly. We should only open the door and there is a new system. So it takes, I think, a long time for this development.
Yeah, just to add on to this, I consider myself a storyteller, so allow me to tell you a story that I think highlights a little bit what was said previously. we talked a little bit about the development or the evolution of civilization, and as you will see, I hope at least I try to highlight this with this example to make clear, to tie together what was said before me. Think about it this way. So let's hypothetically wind back the clock 5, 6, 7,000 years, and kind of what was the average day for the average human being, right? You got up in the morning if you happened to survive the night, and then you went out and you started to collect your berries and nuts or whatever it was that gave you nourishment. But as you can imagine, right, the simple act of going out there and collecting those berries or those roots and those nuts needed energy, right? You have to move. You burn calories by collecting the things that give you calories. Now, in order for you to survive, ideally, like the calories you would collect would be slightly more, but at least the same amount of calories that you burn while you go collecting those, right? So the nuts and the berries should give you as much energy at least as you burned while looking for them. Now, that allows you to enter a steady state, right? There can be no civilizational progress, nothing can happen, because all the energy you have available, you immediately need again to find more energy in the future. So all the food you burn, right, you need in order to search for more food. Now, what happens, of course, if you get smarter at some point, or what we would hope at least, is that you say, okay, fine, instead of just collecting nuts and berries, I'll build a tiny trap and I catch a rabbit, right? That maybe ideally, if I have fire, I char the meat and then I have even more access to those calories. So then you gradually come into a calorie surplus, which then gives you more energy to do things. Potentially, it gives you even more time, because maybe that rabbit nourishes you for an entire day. So you have one entire day where you don't have to go out, collect nuts and berries, you can do something else, right? And this is a little bit, if you want, at least I'm trying to understand what we mean when we say that energy and energy density is so important. Because the more energy dense your sources are, right? If you move from the berries to the rabbit, and then maybe, to the deer and the mammoth, whatever it at the end of the day is, right? What you win is time. And once you have more time to do things, you can do things that you could not do before, right? Because you no longer are out there collecting calories or collecting energy. And I think this is what we have to understand. If we, and that's in some areas the problem with wind and solar, in some areas turning from, let's say in Germany, turning from nuclear to wind and solar is like turning from the mammoth and the rabbit back to the nuts and berries. Now, can you survive on that? Sure. But will you have the same kind of living standard? Will you have the same level of nourishment as you had before? Probably not. And I think this is, again, where we delude ourselves when we say, oh, if the available energy is less than it was yesterday, that will not have an impact on our living standards. It absolutely would have an impact on our living standards. From the early days on, right, you could argue in many ways that the human condition was a conditional searching out or a permanent searching out of energy. Like we talk about agriculture, right? The agricultural revolution. I mean, what ultimately was the agricultural revolution? It was access to more calories, which is just another way to say it was access to more energy. We talked about wind, right? If you take a windmill, for example, or a river, what does it do? If I have a windmill and it grinds the wheat into flour and I don't have to do it by hand, it means that the energy I save from not doing it by hand because the windmill does it for me, I can use for something else. I can develop scripture. I can develop a religion. I can develop all kinds of things. Oh, again, the ancient Greeks sort of told us that it was in fact the gods through Prometheus who gave the flame to us. So maybe they gave it to us. I don't know. I'm not a theologian. But the point is, if you look at the development of human civilization, you always are thrown back to the matter of energy. Now, I know everybody hates this if somebody says, I know the one thing that is at the beginning of everything and has this very monocausal explanation, so I don't want to give you a monocausal explanation, but it's a really, really, really important one. Because at the end of the day, one of the most important things to have a civilization is that you need groups of people that have time to do things that are not connected to the collection of food. But the only way to have those people, a priest class, a senatorial class, whatever, an intellectual class, the only way to have these people is if you have the technical means to provide an energy/calorie surplus. Because otherwise, if I go back to the nuts and berries, everybody needs to go out and collect these things, because otherwise you die because you don't have food. So this is, I think, really why at the end of the day, so much boils back down to the matter of energy. And this is for those of you who study economics, I think also on a global scale, I would always look on, is the world in an energy surplus or is the world in an energy deficit? And I think that will tell you a lot about the things that are going to happen in the future. And we saw this just as a quick add-on. I mean, I found this fascinating. When last year with the energy crisis, kind of this reality hit many politicians and policymakers, particularly in Europe, how quickly, especially the Europeans who went around the globe preaching renewables, preaching the green energy transition, how they went out and bought every single molecule of energy, whether it was coal, whether it was gas, it didn't matter what it was, wherever they could, right? Basically, we Europeans turned out the lights in Pakistan because they could no longer afford to buy LNG, because we Europeans outbid them on the market. Right, we went to South Africa and said, oh, you South Africans, you shouldn't have coal power plants. And then the Germans go to South Africa and say, nice coal you have there, how much do you want for it? Right? And this is, I think, what we're going to see more and more in the future, that in the battle between platitudes and physics, physics is always going to win out. And the same, of course, I would argue also applies to the question of nuclear energy.
Okay, I know I will be a little bit particular now, because, but I did not forget that I asked you something sensitive probably in the beginning, that how you see the future of atomic energy in Germany and Austria. So I did not forget it. You forgot, but I didn't. So please, a little bit I will suspend this evolutionary aspect of the energy sector.
I would, of course, I would defend myself and say that I subtly did answer this question. I mean, whether it's, and you Hungarians know this story as much as the Germans, right? I mean, one of the great things of our people, of our history, was that even though we have been destroyed at least once in a world where some of us have had their entire economy destroyed, twice in a world where we managed to rebuild it. So I think what we are currently doing economically, the current path we are on when it comes to the matter of energy, is a suicidal path. But I'm a strong believer that at some point, once the pain becomes strong enough, there's a regression back to the mean. So I think we'll see, and it has been mentioned before, public opinion. Public opinion is shifting on these matters. I think in many ways the public is ahead of the politicians. But politicians are, for better or worse, opportunists. So you will see, we saw it in Canada, we see it gradually we see it gradually in Denmark, in Norway of all places. Right? As soon as the polls say it's no longer 59% against nuclear, but 59% for nuclear, you have politicians who for 30 years said that, nuclear fission is the devil, all of a sudden saying, I've always been for nuclear. I always deep down thought that nuclear is a fantastic idea, because this is what politicians do. So I think there's at some point there's going to be this regression back to the mean. However, as a cautionary tale about this is, in some countries, and I think Germany is going to be on the top here, in some countries it will take more pain to regress back to the mean than it will in other countries, and that it will have maybe something we're also going to talk a little bit later. Now, this of course can have also significant political repercussions, because this is always kind of on the current trajectory that some European countries have chosen. You will have economic problems, right? Deindustrialization in Western Europe is a real thing, and the idea that politicians have that you can deindustrialize, that you can have people more and more anxious and worried about the future, but this will not have an effect on the political system, I think is entirely delusional. And as we will see, on the path from abundance to poverty lies riot and revolution. And I think this is something that some political systems will find out in the very, very near future.
What is the situation in Germany?
Yeah, the situation in Germany is quite similar as Ralf mentioned. So the majority of the people is meanwhile pro nuclear energy. And I think, to make it short, to my mind, there are two currencies for politicians. One currency is, let's say, euro, and another currency are voters. And so the situation can change, and people are faced, or they are recognizing now that a stable and secure energy supply is very important, not only for the households, but also for the industry. We see that I will not say a lot, but it's a growing up number of companies, big companies. They leave Germany for production. They go to better places where energy is much more cheaper, where bureaucracy is lower, and so on. And we see this development, and I think what I mentioned again, the energy is the blood of the society, of our industrial society and the generation of our values is deeply dependent on energy, and this is what people are seeing. They see increasing prices, and they see, okay, the only way, and also they compare it with the neighbors in not only in Europe but also worldwide, that they see, okay, why other countries they further generate electricity from nuclear energy, and they see some changes in Finland, in Sweden, Denmark, and so on are possible. And I hope for the future, or think that this will also possible in Germany, not within the next year or next a couple of years, but I'm convinced that physics beats ideological opinions, that there is no other way.
Okay, let's hope the best, but I forgot to mention one thing, that if you have any question, please don't hesitate to use the Slido application and ask. Bravery, no problem. So you see that every question can be raised or put. To continue the discussion, I think that I had the feeling that the European Commission was a little bit too ambitious when they planned this greening. The target numbers were always raised in every year. So finally, as you all remember, the coal-fired power plants were planned to be phased out. In many member states, coal exit plans were mentioned and described. And of course, not only in Germany, in many European member states, atom stops were performed or planned. So what do you think that it has any role in the European energy crisis, which were started much before the Russian-Ukrainian war, 1 year before?
The nuclear,
the greening, the too fast greening.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is that the energy transition has been inflationary. I mean, I know this is something that nobody wants to talk about, but it goes back to what we probably in a very long and convoluted way, but tried to say it the first half of this podium discussion. You can't produce anything without energy, right? As somebody once said, it's the only true universal currency because nothing gets done without it. So if the price of energy goes up, the price of everything else goes up. And you can see this. I mean, just think about it from a very simple example, right? I mean, the pub down the street where you tend to have your evening beer. If the guy who runs the pub has an electricity bill that doubles, he needs to get the money from somewhere, so he's going to increase the price of the beer because he needs to keep the light on when you walk into his pub, right? He needs to have his refrigerator on so that the beer is cold. And this is true for everything. You start a company, the first thing you do when you have a company is, you probably have a building, you have an office. You need to heat it, you need to turn the lights on. So this is kind of one of the first things you're going to have on your bill. And if that bill is very high, your prices for the consumer is going to be very high. And if we look at least on a correlation level, transitioning to renewables has nowhere so far led to a decrease in prices. We are constantly, it sounds a little bit, I hope this is not insensitive to a Hungarian audience, but it sounds a little bit like the Soviets in the last days of their empire, right? The utopia is just around the corner. It just takes one last collective push. And this is what we see in this area as well, right? I say, yes, prices will, the German Minister of the Economy, right, Robert Habeck said just recently, said, yes, I know Germany has horribly high energy prices, but with the transition in 3 years, prices will go down. And in 3 years, they're going to say, we are slightly below target, but in another 3 years, prices will go down. And this will then go on forever because, as we said, they're not at war with the nuclear lobby or the fossil fuel lobby. They're at war with the laws of physics and the laws of thermodynamics, and you cannot win this. Now, if I would make a cynical joke, I hope you forgive me, Michael, is that, of course, in German history, fighting reality has become kind of a pastime in many, many ways. I guess it's a leftover of German romanticism, right? That the world as it is just too tragic, so we have to do something about it. But it's very difficult to do something in these areas. And as a last point, because usually I always get emails after such events where people say, Ralph, you're in the pocket of the nuclear lobby. I recently also got that I'm in the pocket of the fossil fuel lobby. But in the nuclear case, which lobby? Right? The worst lobby in the history of energy is the nuclear lobby. We have, and Michael can talk about this in greater detail, we have an energy source that if it would be discovered yesterday, if we would discover nuclear fission yesterday, we would hail it as a miracle. Right? We would say this is the greatest invention ever, but the people who came up with it, the people who built nuclear power plants, had such a terrifyingly bad lobby that they managed to make the most efficient and best form of electricity and energy production the world's most unpopular. So if I would teach, marketing and advertising, I would take the nuclear lobby as my case study, how not to do it. You have the perfect product and you manage to make it completely unsellable. I mean, this is in its own way kind of an astounding feature. I mean, a lot of this has been, and I'm sure we have time to talk about this as well, a lot of this has to do with complete misinformation. But usually somebody then yells, Chernobyl, Chernobyl. Does anybody here by coincidence knows kind of when the last reactor in Chernobyl actually shut down? Like until what time Chernobyl produced electricity? What? Exactly, and they only shut it down because the Germans gave them a lot of money. They didn't even want to shut it down. So this is so every country, Japan the same thing. Japan is now massively moving back into nuclear. So even all the countries that had nuclear incidents moved back to nuclear. I mean, how many people died from radiation in Fukushima? Yeah, there's one person because somebody got cancer 7 years later, and they said this could be connected to what happened in Fukushima. Now, tragic for that one person, don't get me wrong. But we had dams breaking in China that killed between 26,000 and 135,000 people. Nobody said, we can no longer do hydropower because in China something happened. Right? We don't do this. We have more people die falling off the roofs installing PVs than have ever died from nuclear power. But nobody says, we have to ban photovoltaic. Right? We had people, very tragically, right, dying by the installment of wind turbines. But nobody ever said, we have to stop wind turbines. It's only with nuclear. I think it's partially because the Simpsons have depicted it as this weird thing that nuclear is this yellowish ooze, this neon ooze that then drips into everything, and then you have three-eyed fish and 26-legged, cows and all these kind of things. But as I said, it's very tragic that we had this wonderful, wonderful energy at our disposal and didn't use it. And the last point, real quick on this is, because this is completely underestimated, the amount of time, talent, and research we did not have because of the success of the anti-nuclear lobby. Right? Imagine the brilliant young minds that potentially would have gone into nuclear engineering, into nuclear physics, if there would not have been this concerted effort to make it a dirty field, a not used field. We probably would, Michael and I talked about this earlier, we probably would already have fusion if we would not have lost the last 40 years in research, or in some areas in research in this field.
Okay. Do you have
a lot of points, but I would add, or you mentioned there are ambitious targets. Of course, we need ambitious targets for our development. This is not wrong. But I think what we need too is an adaptation of our development to this target, and reverse an adaptation of the targets to our development. So what I mentioned before, this technology readiness level. Yeah? If we see that we cannot enroll some capacity, for instance, for the build-up of electrolyzers, if we cannot establish the grid development within our planned numbers, yeah, then of course we have to correct, or we have to adapt our targets. So, and I think this is for the European community, this is very necessary, because we are not alone. Yeah? We are competing with China, we are competing with India, with all the other countries in the world. And if they have a secure supply of electricity, look for example in China, there are at the moment 136 gigawatt of coal power plants under construction. Yeah? So they will not phase out these coal power plants within the next 10 years. So they will supply electricity within, I'm convinced, within the next 30, 40 years. So, and this is what we have to keep in mind. We must be competitionally. And I can repeat it, the ambitious targets, this is very useful, but then we have to look how we can achieve, or we should carefully look to milestones. So otherwise, and this is also what Rolf mentioned, otherwise we get completely other results. Yeah? Look to Germany at the moment. So in April we phased out our last 3 nuclear power plants, 7 gigawatt. Yeah? From an engineer perspective, just before we said, okay, if we are phasing out or if we shut down these nuclear power plants, then of course we have a demand of energy, and from where we will get it. So we have to buy it from our neighbors. They will help us a little bit, but on the other hand, we have to increase our fossil power plant production. And this is what we see at the moment. So CO2 emissions are increasing in the energy sector due to the recommissioning of coal power plants in Germany. Yeah? And this is not this was not the target. This is not the Green Deal to increase the CO2 emissions. The reverse is the target to reduce CO2 emissions. So, and for that, I think we need a logical and very open debate based on science, based on physics, to recognize what are the reasons for this, to my mind, wrong development.
Okay, guys, I just mentioned that we have a Slido application, and we got so many questions that I have to suspend my dramaturgy, let's say. And I am in the age that I cannot see through my own glasses, so I have to do this way. May I ask one? Marcel Bernat is asking that, is she German plan to replace natural gas with hydrogen, and will it be viable? What do you think?
This is what I mentioned before. Of course, there is the idea, let's say the idea or the target to build up a new natural gas plants. So what I should mention just before that, the supply of natural gas from Russia just before the Ukrainian war prevented us in Germany to recognize that only with wind and solar energy we can fulfill this energy transition, or this Energiewende, called in Germany. So this was then completely disrupted in 2021, and now we have still the idea to build up in the range of 40 gigawatt of gas power plants, 20 or 40, so you find different numbers. But anyway, the question, first of all, is who will build these gas power plants? Because you need a guarantee, and not a guarantee for the next 10 years or next 20 years for such a plant. You need a guarantee for the next 30 and 40 years for the allowance of operation. Next point is gas supply. This is not guaranteed at the moment, and of course the question was hydrogen ready. So at the moment we talking a lot about hydrogen ready gas power plants, and there is the answer from the suppliers. They say, okay, our turbines are hydrogen ready. Hydrogen ready means at least 30% of hydrogen can added to natural gas. This means hydrogen ready. But the question for me is, or there are 2 points. So first point is, again, the technology readiness level. So we haven't seen that a gas turbine was operated for a long time stable with hydrogen. Yeah? There is no experience. So the TRL, or technology readiness level, is, let's say, 7 to 8. It's not 9. But the other side is hydrogen generation. So if we look to the Siemens gas turbine 9000, so this is the largest gas turbine. It needs 120,000 cubic meter per hour of natural gas, and that means 360,000 cubic meter per hour of hydrogen. So, and this huge amount of hydrogen must be produced, must be generated. I don't see that this is, or the rollout of the hydrogen industry is so fast that we have within the next few years enough hydrogen available. Yeah? Disregarding the grid, the transportation, and so on. So I think yes, in future hydrogen is of course a solution. Hydrogen or ammonia and also power to X and all this, this will be a solution for the future. But here again, time and money is still an important question. I don't see it within the next few years.
And what kind of hydrogen? Blue, green, red, black?
This is this is a discussion or a debate we have also at the moment in Germany. So what I say is at the moment we shouldn't limit or there is no a limitation is not favorable, because we need the development of all the applications for hydrogen. Yeah. So, and this is the question. So somebody's or the one hand side says we have not enough hydrogen, and the other side says, okay, but where is the application? Yeah. So we need both for the moment, for the development, and I think there we need all colors of hydrogen for the development of the market. Yeah, and
but a few years ago only the green was accepted. Yeah, you see.
It
has also an evolution.
This is an idle way, and you can call it a dream, but for the development, if we look, for instance, for steel production, we only focus at the moment on the energy or electricity, let's say. If we look to the material industry, if we look to steel production, for instance, in the 1950s, we need for the production of 1 ton of pig iron, we still need 1,000 kilograms charcoal. So meanwhile, we have developed this process, and there is an amount of 500 kilograms necessary. But this is a so-called thermodynamically minimum, or we are close to the equilibrium. If we want to reduce CO2 emissions further, then we have to develop completely new processes. Yeah? Not only in the field of energy, but also in the field of material industry, in the chemical industry, and so on. And if there is also an example in Germany that there is the one steel production with hydrogen. It's in the laboratory or pilot scale, but if you look to such an application of steel production, you need a huge amount of hydrogen. And if this is not available from the so-called green resources, then to develop this technology, I think, or I'm convinced that you need all colors of hydrogen for this market development.
Yeah, especially to decrease the price is important.
And then to reduce the price. Yeah.
And in this respect, the nuclear energy also has importance because probably the most viable way to produce hydrogen in nuclear plants. Please, direct question from the public.
So you are talking about public opinion changing in Germany and return to the nuclear German industry, etc. But actually the question is much more serious. The German nuclear industry is dead. I mean, not just dead that the nuclear power plants were phased out, but once upon a time, Germany had a full-scale nuclear industry. I mean, there were huge corporations with Union and other such companies who were able to build power plants, all components, starting from reactor vessels up to the steam turbines or transformators. We were able to produce fuel, operate these plants, etc. Much of this is now lost, as much as I know. Basically, the German nuclear industry is dead in this sense. If you want to rebuild the German nuclear industry, you need to start somewhere here. Actually, maybe at universities is the first thing. But then you need immense resources. It's not just money, but you need a kind of public agreement that can tolerate decades of development in this field because you can do anything. Do you think that in a democratic country like Germany is there any chance for a government to implement this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. So
these are the best questions.
I think that it depends on the pressure. Yeah? It depends on the pressure, what pressure we feel. If we, maybe we have a European solution that we get all our energy we need from our neighbors, from France, from Austria, and so on. Okay, from Poland, Czechoslovakia. Then there is no pressure. Yeah? And if we get enough hydrogen from Australia or from Colombia or something else, then okay, this would be, this is the ideal way and look out. But I'm really convinced that also our neighbors, they have not that excess of energy that they can supply additionally Germany. And that's why I think the pressure will increase, and with increasing pressure, then maybe something can change. Of course, it is very difficult and to rebuild it and to re-establish it, but yeah, I have no answer. So then if I could see it in the forecast, then I would play in.
What you're talking about is a non-working thing, because what you are basically telling is that you don't need your own energy, you will buy it from someone else, right?
I said maybe this could be a solution, but I'm not convinced that this is the solution. Yeah.
I have to go against you in this, because if you have to buy it from abroad, you are not buying it at the price you can produce, but you will buy it at the highest possible price you can buy it.
Yeah, this is still the situation today. Yeah.
But is that some other industries will suffer this competition if you want to manufacture something.
Yeah.
And someone has his own resources, you have to buy it expensive, then that business will also go bankruptcy.
Completely right. This is the situation what we are faced today. We see it from the prices. So we had just this discussion in the during the morning that we see we have a huge capacity of solar power in Germany, and we see it from in summertime from 5 in the morning to 12 o'clock noon. There's an increasing up to 40 gigawatt of solar power sometimes, and in the evening decreases to 0. So that means round about 5 gigawatt per hour. Yeah, this is a very steep gradient. And yeah, in the noon period, we sell our energy to Austria, yeah, but we sell it sometimes to negative prices. Yeah, that means this is not a business. Yeah. And in the evening, we can, if we need energy again, then we have to pay for it again, very high prices, up to 500 euro per megawatt hour. Yeah, this is, yeah, these are peak prices, but it occurs.
Yeah, it is the case when the production is weather dependent, the price is weather dependent, the energy security is weather dependent. So again, we are returning to the Homo neanderthalensis as far as I can see. But let's move a little bit further. And one of the most sensitive issue, I think, for the public is the waste, the nuclear waste management. Do you see any development, promising development in this field? And no, I would like to ask Rolf, what is the importance in this field?
It's important because it's part of the conversation, but to give you the, around nuclear, but to give you the simple answer, there is no nuclear waste problem, period. Everybody who says there's a nuclear waste problem is either the victim of propaganda or is perpetuating propaganda. We don't have a single, I looked everywhere, we don't have a single case of a human being being harmed by nuclear waste. All the nuclear waste in the United States could be stacked on a football field. This has, I said this before, I'm not saying it's a conspiracy. Well, I guess what is a successful conspiracy, if there's a special term. But this has been the boogeyman of the anti-nuclear lobby, nuclear waste, and it's nuclear for billions and millions and gazillions of years, which of course is also from a physical viewpoint, which is not correct. But as I said, there has not been a single accident. A coal power plant is much more dangerous, right? Based on the toxins it puts into the environment. Mining. This is again one of the things I said early on. We no longer know where stuff comes from. I mean, I encourage everyone to visit a lithium mine, to visit a copper mine. I mean, the stuff that is produced there is much worse for the environment than anything that comes from a nuclear power plant. In the Netherlands, like if you ever have the chance, like you can actually visit their storage facilities for spent fuel. Like you can hug them. If anybody of you is interested to join me for a beer and a banana, I don't know if anybody still eats bananas. If you want to join me for a beer and a banana after this panel, you will digest more radiation than you would living next to a power plant or next to a nuclear waste storage facility. I said there never has been an incident. There never has been an accident. There's always but it could happen. Well, let me tell you one thing. That's the nature of life. That's the nature of politics. It's trade-offs. Yes, something can happen. But we do this all the time. As far as I know, I don't know what the number is in Hungary, people die in car accidents every year. As far as I know, nobody says, well, we have to ban all the cars. Life consists of trade-offs. There are certain risks. But the risks connected to something like nuclear waste are very, very, very small because nothing has ever happened. And we have been building nuclear power plants since the 1960s. So this is, again, as I said, this is a boogeyman. It's anti-nuclear propaganda. And also to the previous question, yeah, there is a lot of knowledge did get lost. I think this is a problem. To rebuild the nuclear industry, I think, would be very difficult. But there's an old saying, if you will the ends, you will the means. So if Germany would make it a national effort to say, we're going to rebuild our nuclear industry, they could. Right? Maybe it would not be the authentic German thing. They probably would have looked at the can-do reactors they built in Canada. Well, I'm not such a fan of the French models, but the nuclear models, the other French models, I'm a huge fan of. So I'm not entirely sure kind of what then the right approach would be. But you could do it, right? We see, I mean, Pakistan, China, they are now building very effective nuclear power plants, and they were latecomers to the game. So if you want to do it, it would be possible. But the waste argument is something that always gets me emotional because it's for me it's a non-starter. As I said, it's part of the propaganda efforts. Unless you can show me a human being that was harmed by nuclear waste, maybe a nuclear waste container dropped on somebody's toe once and they broke their toe. So okay, fine, maybe that did happen. But an actual radiation incident with nuclear waste, we didn't have one. And it's very weird to me to take such a small risk to make the feasibility of probably at the moment the most promising and most effective source of energy and source of technology that would allow a carbon-free, I mean, it's the other thing we haven't touched on it, that would allow almost a carbon-free production of electricity because of a risk that is almost non-existent. I think this is really something wherever one can should stand up against.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe I can add 2 points. So one point is you mentioned risk, yeah, and I think this is a difference between risk and uncertainties. Yeah, and for nuclear power, we can calculate a risk because we have a lot of knowledge there. Yeah, we can calculate the risk, and the risk is very low. But concerning the development of this new system, we talked about before with PV, solar, and storage and restorage and so on. There we cannot calculate risk at the moment. Yeah, because we have not the knowledge, not the numbers to calculate the risk. So there are a lot of uncertainties. And we see for development, of course, there are knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns, yeah, in this development process. And this is, I think, one point we should have in mind. Maybe in 20, 30, 45, 50 years, we see, okay, this way with PV and wind turbines and storage is the better way than nuclear power. Okay, then we can decide, then we have the knowledge, then we can calculate the risk, and then we can decide, okay, shut down the nuclear power. So at the moment, yeah, we have the system not available, we need energy, we need CO2-free energy, and for that, nuclear power is still the single option at the moment, and again with a very low risk. But let me come to the waste materials. So the first fission was in 1983, and the first reactors were established in 1950. So we speak about a development of not below 100 years. So, and the potential of this technology is still existing. There is a very huge potential for further development. This potential is not exhausted yet. So that means this we should keep in mind if we speak about nuclear energy, that it will not stay at the level we know today. There is a potential for further development. And the further development goes in the direction of next generation 4, 4+, and so on, which is able to transform our waste material into energy. And with that, with this transmutation process, we also reduce radiation from the waste from these generators, and I think this is important to see that there is a development, and maybe if we have another solution, yeah, but not the idea. If we have the solution available, then we can decide which solution is better.
Just real quick, just because you mentioned something else, and radiation, for example, right? This is another one of the things. Everybody talks badly about radiation, but like with everything, it's a matter of the dosage. Every one of you probably once has an X-ray, right? And an X-ray can be very helpful. That's radiation. We treat cancer with radiation. Sometimes, hopefully, particularly if somebody's affected that you love, that's a great thing that we have these technologies. It's like, you know, it's like salt. If you digest, I think, what is it, a soup spoon of salt, you're probably going to kill yourself. But it's still an important element for our digestive system. So this is, as I said, there was a huge concerted effort, at least since the 70s, I would argue, to make nuclear impossible. And we see those, I'm surprised that nobody has asked that question so far, which always, it takes so long, right? It takes so long to build nuclear power. It takes 10 years, 15 years, 16 years. But why is that the case? Because we made it politically impossible. Right? The Canadians, right? You disagree?
I disagree, but I was told not to ask more questions.
No, but I would like to hear it. Please tell me.
Actually, nuclear power plants are enormously complicated creatures. They are extremely complicated. Public opinion has no clue how complicated they are. To put together everything working with countless different fields of expertise, very complicated.
Okay, I agree with that, but the point is we know that the Canadians in the 70s and 80s built 1 reactor per year, so it might be complicated, but we have done it. The French built their entire nuclear fleet in 10 years. So it's complicated, but it was done. In Switzerland, at the time of speaking, they still have a nuclear power plant that was built in the 1960s before the microchip. So I agree it's complicated, but we did it. And if somebody tells me the Austrians built a power plant, they never started it, between 72 and 79, in 7 years. So if somebody tells me we could do something in the 70s, and we can no longer do it in the 2020s, I'm sorry, I'm not buying that argument.
Partially you are right, but the problem is that the French nuclear fleet was built on a kind of conveyor belt. I mean, there was one unit produced every year, and that was an efficient use of the French nuclear industry.
Yes, we could do that again.
Under war, in the 70s, the nuclear regulations were much more relaxed than they are now, and much of the strict regulations we have now have good reasons to have it.
I don't think so, because the main reasons were Chernobyl, and Chernobyl had nothing to do. The Chernobyl reactor was nothing compared to the Convoy 80 reactors in Germany. As I said before, it's like saying we cannot build a hydro dam in Austria because a dam broke in China. But you just basically made my argument. It was a political decision. We had an incident in Ukraine, and now we said, oh my God, we have to make more regulations in Germany. So there was not a single nuclear incident in Germany, yet they used a plutonium nuclear factory as it was in Ukraine as an argument, or in Fukushima a tsunami. So it's a political problem. It's not. I'm just saying I mean, because I enjoy this a little bit, but you contradicted yourself. You started saying it's a complicated technological problem. Then you said, well, they could build it fast because they built it in a conveyor belt system, and it's actually the regulation. And that's exactly my point. If you mass produce it, you can do it very quickly. If you make political regulation, you can't. But it's either one or the other. You cannot start with the technical argument and end up at the political argument.
Please, I am the moderator, but I can give you the microphone if you wish, but I will not. So, so sorry, I have to, I am with my boss, according to my bosses, I am the moderator, so I have to continue it. And this is where I got my salary, so I have to continue. Sorry, and just because Michael already mentioned the one kind of way for the further development, the 4+ or 3+ reactors which can use nuclear waste or use the heating core or elements, they can recycle it. So just to continue this development. In the journals, you can hear a lot of times about the small modular reactors. What do you think about them? And also, it is a question for Ralph. Are they really the real solutions for the future of nuclear energy, or it is just some kind of complementary technology? What do you think?
So I'm looking also very carefully to this development, but I have no information or no knowledge directly from there. So I'm also dependent on the information what I read from the papers and so on. So yeah, it seems to be promising, but we will see how it will go on in future. From the technical point of view, I think this is a very reliable concept, but yeah, we haven't seen it in the practical use. And here again, we have to take the same scale like the other technologies, to say technology readiness level is still in a very early stage, I think, and we will see how it will proceed.
Just very quick. What is very often underestimated is that the production of industrial steam or industrial heat actually produces more emissions than our aviation and transportation sectors. And particularly kind of generation 4 reactors, they can already reach temperatures, not necessarily for steel or for example, for polysilicon production, but for example, the Haber-Bosch process. You could do things for artificial fertilizer production. And very often, these factories at the moment have, for example, small coal power plants on site. So what you could hypothetically do, if, as Michael correctly pointed out, like if the technology reaches that maturity stage, you could then replace those small coal power plants with a small modular reactor, in particularly for industrial applications. So that could be interesting. It would be interesting for transportation, particularly on ships, right? Most of the kind of the global fleets operate on diesel engines. So if you could replace some of those diesel engines with nuclear power, again, also from an environmental viewpoint, that would be, I think, an interesting application. But of course, I will admit, despite my admiration for nuclear, one has to admit, of course, the more it proliferates, the higher the risks will also be, right? Of course, if all of a sudden every ship has a nuclear power plant on it, things will happen, right? I think again, one should not be blind to this either. But if we say, for example, we could start to move it into industrial areas, as I said, Haber-Bosch, steam production in some areas, replace coal with nuclear for environmental, but also for health reasons. I mean, burning coal and coal has done a lot for humanity in the past, but burning coal is really, really bad. I think if we could replace this with nuclear in some areas in the years to come, that'd be very, very beneficial.
Okay, thank you very much. I think my personal view is that the SMR has a big advantage because they are small, looking more safe, nicer. They are covered with PV panels. Even they can paint it green, and it is just a joke, but really they are more how can I say, public friendly. And these are actually the same technology which is used in nuclear aircraft carriers or submarines, so it exists. And to answer my last question, you have to use your imagination, very, very hard. So how will look the electricity mix in 2050 when all Europe will be decarbonized? What do you think?
Should I start? And you can correct me. Yeah, this is not easy to answer, but on the other side, if you ask worldwide, so what I mentioned before, we see a huge amount of coal power plants still under construction and in the planning phase in China, also in India. So they will still be on the grid also 2050. And if we, the outgoing point from today is that we have in worldwide, I think less than 5% of so-called renewable energy in the electricity production. We have 50% of gas and oil. I think the part of renewable energy will increasing, of course. I think worldwide in the range of 10 to 15% maybe. Gas, oil. If we look to the mobility sector worldwide, not only in big cities or in Central Europe, but if we look worldwide, then I don't see that we will have electrical cars in Africa everywhere, or in the United States everywhere. I think we have 40% maybe of oil and gas still 2050. I think 10 to 15% of nuclear power, and also 10 to 15% in the range of coal power still existing. And what we keep in mind is that we mentioned it not so in detail in our discussion here, is if we want to reduce our CO2 emissions with regard to zero emission in 2045, 2050, then electricity is only one part. So I think we have to keep in mind, if we speak about percentages, the real numbers of energy behind, and that means that we have to double, or we have 3 times more of electricity in Europe, for this case that we have all a complete electrification, let's say. And that's why I think these are my this is my proposal. If you can correct it or maybe
I fully agree. I would just maybe add one wrinkle to this, which is if we remember what caused last year's energy crisis, it was Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I think what this shows is as the world becomes less stable, I think that more and more countries will shift from the focus from green energy to secure energy, which is completely understandable. I mean, Europe did the same, right? I mean, Europe spent $1.2 trillion on buying energy last year. And I think we'll see this in other areas as well. I think the biggest challenge, let's say, for the renewables industry will be that you cannot be simultaneously in a conflict with China if China controls 90% of the supply chains for the renewables industry. So what will countries do? So for example, if I'm Germany and I say, okay, I can no longer get photovoltaic and wind turbines from China, what will I do? Well, what do the Germans have? Coal. Right? And I think you will see similar things in other countries. The British will say, okay, if I can no longer get these things from China and they still control these supplies, they have oil and gas in the North Sea. What will the United States do? They will continue fracking. They will continue shale exploration. So I think that is one of the parts that we don't discuss enough at the moment, is that gradually countries will look at which energy sources are reliable. And unfortunately, as I said before, one of the most reliable is coal. You can keep it on site, right? You can stack it. It's easy. It's transportable. It's much easier than other forms of energy. I mean, even for example, the European course currently to say, oh, we just switch from Russian pipeline gas to LNG. Well, that works as long as the United States can ship the LNG. All it takes is one hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico, right? Higher demand in Asia. If they can pay more, they don't have to sell it to Europe. Right? Then all of a sudden we're in the next energy crisis. So the coal power plants in Germany, they will remain on for a very, very, very long time. So the idea that they're going to phase them out in 2035 is unlikely for the very reason. We see, by the way, the same in Indonesia. Indonesia made big promises. They switched back to coal. Pakistan switched back to coal because all of them say that they have to look at their energy security. China, the same thing. Right? I think there's always this idea that China builds out their renewables because they're such huge fans of climate policies. China has to import 75% of its petroleum products. They know the only force that can cut them off is the US Navy. So if they can reduce that dependency, they become more secure. So they say if we have EVs, if we can power those EVs with coal, solar and wind, we need less petroleum products and therefore are less exposed to the threat by the United States. These are security concerns. They say it's about climate because then they can shake hands with John Kerry and look good. But in truth, of course, this is driven by their national security concerns. The same in the United States, right? If the United States ease sanctions on Venezuela, if they ease sanctions on Iran, it's because they tried to ride, two horses with one ass. They don't want to explore in their own backyard, but they still want others to do it because they need the energy. But also they will find out that you don't want to depend on unreliable partners. So once you have whoever it's going to be back in the White House, it's literally going to be back because either Joe Biden is back or Donald Trump is back. So one of them will be back in the White House. You will see more exploration domestically in the United States. And I think you will at some point also see that exploration in Europe because every politician knows how long does it take? I mean, how many warm meals do the people have to miss? How many blackouts do you need for people to go out in the street to revolt? And at some point, fracking will look more attractive than people out in the streets rioting. And I think this is kind of what we're getting to.
Theoretically, I agree with you concerning the coal power plants in Germany, but practical, we have to see that there is a certain end of life of the power plants, and I don't see. At the moment, it is very difficult to bring back already decommissioned coal power plant into the operation. It is very difficult, not only from the technical point of view, but also from the skilled worker point of view. So we have a shortage of skilled worker who can operate this plants, and that's why I think this we have to keep in mind. Of course, coal you can pile it, but on the other hand, there is the end of the life of these power plants from the technical point of view and also from the skilled worker point of view, and that's why, we need to recognize it very soon. Otherwise, we will get a really big problem.
Okay, at the end of the panel discussion, to be honest, I have to tell you that I cannot get I could not get closer to answer that question, how we will be climate neutral in 2050 globally. I have a clue how we can do it in Europe. Everything will be driven by electricity, and the electricity will be green or decarbonized. This is the way how we can imagine it at all, and this is the takeaway message, that please buy a lot of electric stuff, change everything to electric, and hopefully this electricity will be green, and in this way your electric car will be really green, not just in the tails. And sorry, it's a bit skeptic, but I don't think that the reality is better than that. So thank you for coming, thank you for participating, and thank you for asking questions. And this is the end of the panel discussion. Thank you.